Guest tonight from Syracuse is the president of SUNY Oswego, Deborah Stanley. In studio with me is Mike Elmendorf. He is the New York State Director of the National Federation of Independent Business. And Ron Deutsch is the Executive Director of New Yorkers for Fiscal Fairness. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you, Liz.
So I hope I'm correct in assuming that that is correct. You guys are not thrilled with the two-way plan. Mike, you want to start? Who is? Right, indeed.
Liz, around the state, small business owners are looking at Albany and scratching their heads. That's maybe not anything new, but from their perspective, the process stinks, and it's likely that the final product is going to stink pretty badly too. And if they ran their businesses the way that the state has been running its finances, doing a budget piecemeal like this, not knowing how much they're spending, not knowing how much they're taking in, but making obligations along the way, they'd be out of business.
And I believe your problem would be taxing, right? You would oppose any of the new taxes.
Taxing and spending is the problem. Here we are again, we're spending more than we did last year. We're raising taxes in a lot of different ways and deferring tax credits, which in our mind is a spending increase. There's some things that they've not done that we think are good. We're pleased that wine and grocery stores isn't going forward. That was a real assault on small business. It was a one-shot revenue grab, if that, and we think that the revenues that were projected there were totally wrong. It looks like that's dead. We can put a cork in that one. I've been saving that one all day for you. The soda tax didn't go forward. The soda tax was another real loser. The idea that taxes are going to make people healthier is ridiculous. So we're pleased at that.
So you probably agree to disagree on much of some of that.
We sat in the other room and agreed to disagree for quite some time. But
okay.
Yeah, we worked it out. Now there's a unity.
Oh, good. There will be no blood on the table. That's
no
fantastic.
blood whatsoever. Yeah, obviously, we come at this from the perspective of how's this going to affect low-income, working-class New Yorkers, and we're obviously very concerned because we feel like, middle-income people are bearing the brunt of these budget cuts, first of all, and the revenue raisers that are being included are generally pretty regressive. I wasn't opposed to the soda tax, but I think now that we're moving in this new direction of the clothing sales tax reinstatement, I think we have a real problem with that because no progressive taxation seems to be occurring in this budget whatsoever.
Well, one piece actually, the reduction of the charitable deduction for very, very wealthy people who make over $10 million and from 50% to 25%.
So we're going to de-incentivize the ability of people to give at a time when we're cutting social service programs substantially.
Deborah, let's bring you into the conversation. Also, my understanding is you would, I would assume, say that the fact that the SUNY tuition program is not in there is a problem for people who have been advocating it like yourself.
I think it's a much more complex problem for SUNY. Certainly we are an entity of the state, so we're happy to have a budget and go forward, keep people in work and offering the courses and the credit and degrees that we need to offer. We are happy with the restorations of TAP. We always wanted this budget to close and come forward. I wouldn't call it the SUNY Tuition Act. I would call it the New York State Public Higher Education Empowerment and Innovation Act. I do understand that. But of course, this is not the last you're going to hear of it. This is a major reform. This act collected for the citizens of New York State, not just SUNY, but certainly for the taxpayers, for the students, for the families of these students, and for the future, the economic future of New York State. It collected reforms and freedoms, if you will, operating freedoms that collected a great consensus around the state. 64 campuses in SUNY and CUNY also represented agreement on this act. We had the business community throughout New York State in our major corporations supporting the act. We had the not-for-profit communities, the economic development agencies, families and students and faculty supporting the act. So these are reforms you're going to hear about in the future. We are happy that we've had the forum to start to talk about them. Certainly we're disappointed that none of the reforms were enacted at this point.
When you say that you're pleased that you had the forum to discuss them, it sounds to me like you consider them dead, except that Senator John Sampson, the Democratic conference leader, said quite clearly that there were some senators who were actually holding out. Antoine Thompson, for example, and Bill Stikowski from Western New York, where University of Buffalo has been very strong on this particular issue. And they say that there are still talks going on with the Speaker. Is that not your understanding?
It is my understanding, and of course it's changing minute by minute, and we're grateful for that. We still have the forum. The forum's going to continue. It's going to continue tomorrow. We hope to recognize some pieces of this legislation, if not all of this legislation, in the revenue bill tomorrow.
You know, actually, Deborah makes an interesting point, which is that it would be better actually to have some predictability. I mean, after 80-plus days, at least they're doing something. Do you not agree with that statement?
I have a problem because I think this is like the Frankenstein budget, right? I mean, all things that have died come back to life all of a sudden again. You know?
And walk around.
Right, and they become more monstrous as they return back to life. So, you know, I think that's a problem. And the other problem is there's been such secrecy around this budget process in terms of, you know, nobody knows what the policies are until like the last minute, and then everything is just dumped on the lap of the public. And then we're supposed to try and figure this out and digest it in a matter of 24 hours and try and figure out what they're doing. So, you know, I think that this process has really been one that, I mean, it's just been abysmal, really, in terms of the public's knowledge of what's going on.
And actually, you worked in an administration. You worked in the Pataki administration. This is certainly not the way. We saw a lot of late budgets during the Pataki administration. We never saw anything that looked like this.
No, I mean, the process has been horrible. And, you know, there was budget reform that's taken place over the course of several cycles. That process has been completely discarded the last 2 years. You've had a budget that's been negotiated entirely in secret. Given particularly what last year's budget looks like, I could understand doing it in secret because it was the worst budget ever. If I was crafting that budget, I might not want people to have watched me do it either. But it's been just very frustrating because, as I said, the product is bad. Last year's budget, I think, clearly put us in a much worse position this year. The biggest spending increase in history, the biggest tax increase in history, during the worst economy since the Great Depression, and it wasn't even balanced. If you're going to raise taxes more than you ever have before, at least balance the budget, pay for it. And here we were back in Albany, not long after that budget was enacted, doing a deficit reduction plan.
Okay, so what are we expecting, first of all, is going to happen in the next 24 hours? I mean, actually right now, we're waiting to hear what the governor's going to say, and I don't know, has anyone had any indication, and Deborah, chime in if you would, has anybody heard if the governor is in fact going to be doing the vetoes and making good on his threat, or do we just not know?
I really have no idea what the governor's going to say minute to minute.
He might not either. I mean, I think anyone who's predicting at this point what's going to happen